welcome everybody. I apologize for being a little late. Just want to talk a little bit about the Attorney General's opinion today regarding the Republican budgets, both the House and the Senate Republican budget. And what is clear is I think this opinion talks about three different types of issues. The first issue is if there's no existing contract, then you cannot have an action for which someone can bring a case, which is true in the Senate Republican budget. We do not interfere with any existing contracts. We don't interfere with the CBAC agreement, and we don't interfere with the 21 contracts which terminated in 2016. So what's clear on the first page of the Attorney General's opinion is the Senate Republican budget has a green light to go full speed ahead. With respect to the second part of the decision by the AG, he says that, look, if you are going to interfere with an existing contract, you have to have certain legitimate reasons to do so. And those legitimate reasons can be, and he says in this, fiscal concerns and fiscal crisis, and it has to be of a public policy. And then the cases that are cited talk about what circumstances in which you could interfere with existing contracts. And I think the most applicable case that the Attorney General cites is the City of Buffalo case, where they were going to put freezes on town employees' wages. And the court came out and ruled that raising taxes isn't always the issue. You got to look at the totality of the circumstances. It was unforeseen. It was a fiscal crisis. It was in the public policy to do that. And he went ahead and he did that. So I believe in this particular matter, once again, Senate Republican budget is clear sailing. There's no challenge, and anyone who suggests there could be a challenge is misinformed or purposely misleading. The final note I'd like to put on is I think that makes the vote on this CBAC agreement and the 12 contracts even more critical for this reason. In the decision by the court, it talks about the fact that it is a fiscal crisis and unforeseen events that came across that would lead you to have some right to interfere with the contractual rights. Well, if you are to approve this deal, given the set of circumstances Connecticut is facing now, 6 years of budget deficits, largest tax increases in the past, and still in a hole, and you improve this, and 2 years from now, we have a nationwide recession, I don't think you could use, the bar would be extraordinarily hard to go high, to go back and say, we need to tinker with the existing contracts. It's our only relief. So I think that this points to the fact that we have to be very, very concerned about this vote on Monday. There should be no rush into this vote on Monday. We should understand, at least on the Democratic side, where they're going, and we don't know where that is. So with that, we welcome and embrace the decision by the AG. We think it's sound reasoning.
Last week, the Speaker called the House Republicans' plan for budget concessions illegal. What is your response to that?
I would say that that is an error by the Speaker. It is not illegal given the decision by this. There is an issue that if it was challenged, that there is a pathway. This is a roadmap that the AG has laid out in which you can interfere with existing contracts, and it's a fact test whether or not you would be successful. Once again, I look at the City of Buffalo case with respect to the House Republican budget, where they do make changes to some existing contracts, that there is a foothold for which they could grab onto and try to take on the burden of showing it is legitimate.
With union concessions aside, do you think that some are critical, saying that lawmakers are more concerned about being weak and being reelected than they are about passing a budget?
I think that there are certain moderate Democrats who are getting a lot of pressure to vote in favor of the CBAC agreement and the contracts. And I think they're getting, I would say, an unfair amount of pressure. They should be left alone to decide not politically, but economically, whether or not this is a good deal or a bad deal for the state. No one should be pressuring them with ideas of being primaried or being cast aside by their party. This is not a party issue. This is a state of Connecticut issue.
Len, I mean, when I look at the last paragraph
Yep.
of this opinion, I don't necessarily see how it jives with your forceful conclusions here. It says the two budget proposals that were identified, the House and Senate Republican proposals, would raise substantial constitutional questions under the contract clause. It is difficult to predict with any certainty how a court would likely rule if presented with a constitutional challenge. It mentions the potential for running afoul of the constitutional standards under the contract clause. The first footnote says, we have not, for instance, undertaken an analysis of whether the state unilaterally may alter wages or benefits covered by expired collective bargaining agreements. So I don't necessarily understand how you reach some of your conclusions.
Sure.
Based on reading the same opinion.
So let's read that first sentence on that last paragraph on the last page. Ultimately, to the extent that the budget proposal that you identified in your letter impair existing contracts, so the assumption is, does it impair existing contracts? Senate Republicans do not impair existing contracts. So if we're not impairing existing contracts, the rest of that paragraph has no event to us whatsoever.
Don't the state police union have an existing contract?
We're not going to impair the state police existing contracts. Number two, in the footnote, we have not, for instance, undertaken the analysis whether the state unilaterally may alter wages or benefits governed by expired collective bargaining, because the question before the AG was, does the interference with a contract affect the contract clause powers that limits the state to modify a contract? So his opinion doesn't talk about if you don't have a contract, because you can't have a violation of a contract clause if a contract doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of have a legal mind to this to say he's not opining if there's no contract. The question is if there is a contract, which is what the contract clause plays to.
But the opinion also cites two other cases besides the Buffalo teachers case that appear to be in tension with each other. So you seem to be focusing on the Buffalo teachers case.
So let's look at these.
Surrogates and Candell.
So let's look at surrogates and Candell's. So in the surrogate case, what happened was there was a deficit, and they wanted to expand the court system when they were also trying to freeze wages. And the court said, hey, listen, you want to expand government over here and add costs. On the other hand, you're trying to hurt wages. We don't believe that that's the right thing to do. If you want to expand the court system, then raise taxes to do your expansion of government, but don't go after wages. And that's what the court did on that. Same thing on the other case, the Condell case, if you look at it, they say that we acknowledge that you can impair contracts' rights, but the billion-dollar deficit wasn't really sufficiently severe or enough for the state of New York. We have a $17 billion budget. I'm sure theirs is much higher than our budget. So they looked at that and said, that's just not enough of impairment. I would argue a $5 billion deficit to a $17 billion budget is a significant impairment. So those two cases are clearly distinguishable.
Are you saying the House Republican plan, based on this opinion, would not be constitutional?
I would say, no, I would say that House Republican plan may have one more hurdle to go, and I think they're in good position to argue that this is an unprecedented time in the state of Connecticut. We've never had 6 years of budget deficits when we had 2 years the highest tax increases and still having budget deficits. So I think they have a legitimate public purpose for doing it. It is financial reasons is a reason. We're cutting social services. The commissioner of DRS says you can't raise taxes. We're cutting municipal aid. So they have done everything they can to demonstrate that this is the last alternative that we can have. So when you add all that up together, I think they got a pretty good case. Now, whether it be successful, I don't have a robe on, but I think they have a legitimate facial case that they could go forward. But Senate Republican budget clearly doesn't have to go through those hurdles.
Your contention is that this opinion says that because the contracts have expired, that there wouldn't be any legal grounds for a challenge to what you're saying. But when contracts, the collective bargaining contracts that come they are extended by mutual agreement until there is an agreement, so they are still in effect.
Except not the entire agreement is extended, so the wage and step-ups are not extended, and that's where we look at the saving.
It freezes where it is.
No, they're not extended. So it freezes where it is. In our budget, we continue to freeze.
Consider the contract.
But those clauses are frozen, and we say, okay, in our budget, we don't have wage increase for 3 years. That's our savings. So we're not interfering with that contract. They're not entitled to a step-up by their own agreement that ended. They don't protect step-up and don't protect any wage increases. Those things are left out of the agreement when it's extended. And those are the two things that we go to, which are not contracted for. They're there, but they're not contracted for. So we're in the clear.
Glenn, can I go back to talk about the moderate Democrats in the Senate? Senators Hartford, Doyle, and Salzberg have all said publicly they have questions and they're not sure about this. They all said recently they're still doing due diligence. I just want to know, have any of those three come to talk to you or approached you about the Senate Republican labor savings plan?
None of the three senators have talked to me directly about our labor savings in our budget. We have certainly made available to everybody, but they have not sat down to me to go over with me on those labor savings.
So you don't have any real expectation of where they stand one way or another on your plan?
I do not know where they stand on our plan. I think they understand our plan. I don't know if they would vote in favor of it. And I do believe that they are working very hard to understand all the factors with respect to this. I think they are taking their task extraordinarily seriously, as they should. And I think that they are looking at and evaluating as much as they can.
If you have any chance at all of derailing approval of this concession deal, you'd have to peel off one of those votes.
You're right. And I think those are three very intelligent people who have been here for a long time, some longer than me, who understand this process and understand what they have in front of them. They have the information that I think that they need to make a decision, except for the Office of Fiscal Analysis piece.
You're not actively pursuing it.
I am not.
Saying nice things about them here.
I am not actively pursuing them. I think they know what I would like them to do without me saying it. I think they know what my position is with respect to the deal on Monday. But I am not actively seeking them to tell me how they're voting and what they're voting on.
How about on the budget? Are you actively pursuing them on the budget if you're not doing it on CBAC? Are you doing it for the Republican budget?
Well, Marty has indicated that I'll be allowed to run my budget, but he hasn't said when. So if there is a date set for my budget, I will be reaching out to every member of the Democratic Caucus to sit down with them and talk to them about the budget.
Senator, has Electric updated its fiscal for the
We met with OFA the day that the House was in and asked them, questioned them about their document, indicating that we had some reservations about the conclusions that they reached and the manner in which we reached them. We have asked them for a full OFA analysis before Monday. They have assured us that they would do that. We've also asked Office of Legislative Research for a full analysis, not economic, but non-economic analysis, and we're supposed to get that as well. To date, I do not have anything.
Are you supposed to get it by Friday?
I'm supposed to get it before Monday, but I don't know what that means, other than before Monday. I don't know if it'll be today, Friday, or Saturday. I will follow up on that.
Do you think this letter is going to change people's minds?
I think this letter should change the minds of legislators, because I really think what's really scary is that if you do approve this, you're stuck for 10 years. There's no way you get out of this. No matter what the economic circumstances are, I believe you're stuck.
Senator, yesterday the governor said that it's not likely that we're going to get a meeting before October. What do you say?
Look, I hope that's not the case. There are people hurting, and I think we need to do something before October. I have suggested, look, you may not like the Senate Republican budget, but why not approve it, get something going, and then amend it later on the areas you don't like?
But you said this for the past 1 month.
Well, I don't control that thought process. I would say if you want to sort of put my ideas to bed, then let's put it up on the board and vote on it. And if it's voted no, then I recognize there's not majority support. But until there's a vote, I have a right to say what I'm going to say, and I think they should do it. Because not having a budget, as I said before, hesitation is devastation. And not having a budget is devastating to many, many people. I had a woman who called me up, I just said last week, who has a adult child that she's a lifelong friend, adult child, who's at home. She's a teacher. She works during the summer for extra income, who has to give up her part-time job because she has to stay home with her son, Jonathan, because she only has help 2 days a week. And she had to give up her job. He needs 24-hour care because he has a lot of issues. Well, that's not fair to this family, and there's plenty of other stories like that.
So what's the holdup? Why aren't you talking about the budget?
I am talking about, let me just say this. I want to be clear on this, 100% clear on this. I have sent letters, I have sent emails, I've been in the press to sit there and talk to the Democrats. I have said, when you want, I am here. The Speaker has reached out to me 3 times, once with him, twice with his staff, but not to negotiate, but to ask me, why did you do this in your budget? Why do you do that in the budget? Can you give me this backup? Do you give me that backup? And I gave them everything. We are not hiding anything. And they said, it's very helpful, we're going to add it to our budget. That's great. But we have to have a back and forth. And you can only have a back and forth when you have a budget that you could bring and say, here's our budget, soup to nuts. This is what we want to do. Compare it to your budget, and let's horse trade a little bit. That exchange has not taken place. Have they done fact-finding from me? Absolutely. But when I ask them, well, what are you doing here? Well, we're not sure yet. What are you doing with ECS? We haven't really come to that conclusion. How about municipal aid? Well, we're still thinking about this. I'm not going to say the things they said because I think that's private. But we're still thinking about this, and we're still thinking about that. We haven't drawn a conclusion. Well, what about hospitals? Well, you know, we're still working with them on this other issue. We're not. How do I have a negotiation? You know what my budget is. Just compare the two. Let's figure out where we meet and where we don't meet. So I have reached out tirelessly, and I will say now, as I said before, there's going to come a point in time that I'm not going to reach out anymore, that I'm done. Because no matter what you do, you can't save the budget unless you go draconian. And they know that, and I've told Senator Looney, and I've told the Speaker verbatim, there's going to come a time that I am not going to have a negotiation because there'll be nothing left to negotiate. Because I believe, and I said this to them, and I believe this inside of me, we need a bipartisan budget now for the people of the state of Connecticut and for the citizens and for the businesses of the state of Connecticut. It will set a tone that will drive the state forward. But if you don't want to do it, and you don't want to have those conversations, that's your privilege to say that. And that's where we are right now. And they have everything. Even certain moderate Democrats we met with, we gave them everything and described our budget in detail. Every line item. And Lisa Hammersley, as you all know, is my ace with respect to my budget, has had her door open. They can meet with Lisa without me. I do not hold anything as my property. It is open to whatever they want. And they've met with Lisa, but that's it. Just to get information from her, not to have a discussion about. And those are two different things. You know what I really think it is? I think it's multiple years of one-party rule and sort of pushing through what they want to push through. And for the first time in a long time, they can't do that. Before, they used to look through the budgets that we've passed. There have been some no votes in the Senate, but there were enough numbers to cover up those no votes with yes votes and still get it through. This is the first time, maybe in over 100 years, right, because we're tied, but this is the first time in at least 25 years that the majority party, if you would, has to really talk to the minority party and or make sure everybody is on board with their budget. And they're finding that process difficult because they never had to do it before. Before, they're able to say, hey, vote for the budget. As you saw under House Speaker Sharkey, the House was there for 40 hours, right? And we all saw people coming in and out of the chambers with the speaker making deals. Those days are gone. There's no carrots to give out. There's no goodwill to give out. It's strictly numbers. And that's a difficult thing when you have these close numbers. So I'm not sure it's ego as much as it is they're not accustomed to having this type of dynamic in the building.
What is your,
On Monday, or whatever day you were in, I forget, was it Tuesday? You don't think a deal was made to allow for the override vote, the successful override vote on the affordable housing bill in order to get one senator's vote on the union concession deal?
You know, I've checked into that, and I was told that that was not the case. I'll take people for their word, Mark.
What is your response?
Hoping to accomplish it. Do you
On
want-
Monday?
On Monday, in light of this, do you want them to take up, I don't know, what do you want them to do? Like not take up the union deal, or to take up your proposal, or just wait?
I think that what I'd like them to do is vote no on the union deal. That's what I'd like them to do. I'd like them to be sure that when they do vote, they have all the facts in front of them, OFA, OLR, and knowing this decision by the AG. I think all that needs to be put into a pot, and I want to make sure that this is very, very serious business. We are at a crossroads in this state, and that's the reason why the political move, frankly, is to stay silent and let the Democrats do what they want to do. That's the political move from the Republican side, I view. But that's not the right move, because in 2018, there may not be a state to save, because if we don't get it right now, I don't know what the state's going to look like in 2018. That's why it's so important, I believe, to come together and get it right. And that means items have got to be on the table, we've got to talk about them. But there has to be a discussion. I can't get that.
What's your response? The speaker 2 minutes ago said that the AG's opinion, despite what you said, that the AG's opinion confirms that your budget is illegal.
Well, first of all, words are meaningless without an analysis. And when the AG says that you can affect, that if there's no contract in place, you cannot have a, as he puts it, a contract clause limitation claim, right? So what it says is that state government can't interfere with existing contracts through the legislature because that violates the contract clause, right? That's what it says. Well, if there's no contract, you can't have that cause of action. Obviously, he's not reading it correctly. I appreciate the fact he's not a lawyer, so I'll give him a little bit deference because of that. But I think when you look at it, it clearly states that if there are no contracts, in the last paragraph that Paul points out says, if it impairs existing contracts, we do not impair any existing contracts.
And below the speaker's comment is a comment from Representative Mike DeAugustino. And it says the current CBAC agreement is an existing contract with
Correct.
the state, expires in 2022.
Correct.
The Republican Senate proposal makes unilateral
Hold, what do you say?
that-
Republican what?
The Republican Senate proposal makes unilateral changes that impair that contract and exposes the state to significant legal liability under the contract clause.
Okay, so he's absolutely misinformed and wrong. We make changes after 2022. Those changes take place after 2022. The savings are in 18 and 19 because the actuary who ran the numbers, who is OPM's actuary, says if you make these changes, you're going to save what turns out to be $70 million in 18 and 19. So clearly, he is 100% wrong. He's misinformed. He hasn't read my budget. He hasn't even asked me about my budget. It doesn't surprise me because it doesn't fit into his narrative, but he's dead wrong. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And that settles that. I do like him. He's from Hamden. I do like him.
Do you, on a level, do you think that because of your new power in the legislature, that you're digging your heels into the sand and not budging, and that's creating more?
No, look, I think that we have always said that we need to have structural changes in the state. We said that in 2011 and virtually every year thereafter. And we have always said that's what we have to do. And they've never really listened to us. They said, we got this. Remember, we're doom and gloom Republicans. And now the sky has fallen, and now they're trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. So no, it's not digging our heels in. I said, I will have a conversation. Let's have one. I just haven't been invited. It takes two for that to happen. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.